Unaware the wife he mocked was a secret billionaire CEO worth $10 billion, husband and in-laws laughed at her dress during his birthday. What she did next? He didn't just laugh at her. He stood in the middle of his crowded birthday party, with his relatives watching, his mother smirking at his side, and joined in as they mocked the woman who had quietly funded his entire life. That night, Lena Waverly walked into the ballroom wearing a pale blue dress she had repaired with her own hands. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive looking, but it was the same dress she'd worn on the night Mark first told her he loved her, back when his promises sounded real and his eyes still carried respect. Now the room was different. The cake rolled out, the lights dimmed. She stepped closer to fix Mark's crooked collar, an old, gentle habit, and in that small, tender moment, the hem of her dress brushed too close to the candles. A tiny flame, a quick scorch, a dark burn across the blue fabric, gasps, then laughter. His mother, Ruth, leaned forward with a voice sharp enough to cut air. Maybe next year she'll dress like a wife, not a maid. The guests laughed, his relatives laughed, and Mark laughed with them. He thought she was just his simple wife in a cheap dress. He thought her silence meant weakness. He thought her eyes shining in the candlelight were filled only with shame. What he didn't know was this. The woman standing there, gripping the burned fabric in the shadows after the party, was the hidden owner of his business, the unseen name behind frozen accounts, and the CEO of a private empire worth $10 billion. Before the night ended, she would unlock her other phone, walk into a building he'd never seen, meet a lawyer he didn't know existed, and sign the first document that would turn his laughter into the very thing that destroyed him. And she would do it all without raising her voice. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Lena walk out of that ballroom alone, with no one to witness what comes next. When you click that button, you stand with every person who has been mocked, underestimated, and quietly planning their comeback. Please subscribe now. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done if you were in Lena's shoes. The morning started with a sharp intensity. Lena jolted awake before the sun even touched the curtains. Her heart raced for no visible reason, as if some unseen clock inside her warned that every second mattered. She lay still for a moment, staring at the dim ceiling, trying to slow her breathing. Then she remembered. Today wasn't just any day. Before midnight, the board needed her final approval on a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. And in less than a week, her husband's 35th birthday party, planned like a small royal event, would drag her again into the world that saw her as just Mark's wife. Lena Waverly, 32 years old, gentle in manner, yet sharpened by years of difficult lessons, pushed the blanket aside and rose from the bed. Her husband, Mark Harrison, 35, still slept beside her. His peaceful expression would have looked comforting to anyone else, but Lena knew better. Mark was affectionate on some days, cold on others, and careless with his words more often than he realized. She loved him, but that love carried a weight she had learned to hide. She moved through the room with soft steps, not wanting to wake him. On the corner table rested her leather-bound planner, dark, worn, and secured with a small brass lock. This planner was the one thing she never misplaced, never left open, never let anyone touch. Even Mark knew that, especially Mark. Years ago, when he'd asked what was inside, she had smiled and said, "Old personal notes, it's just how I clear my head." He'd laughed and called it her little diary, then lost interest. She'd never corrected that assumption. Before making coffee or turning on lights, Lena unlocked the planner. Her fingers trembled. Not from fear, but from years of responsibility that never truly let her rest. Inside were not reminders for groceries, errands, or chores. The pages were filled with coded financial notes, screenshots of silent asset movements, legal restructuring plans, and summaries of board discussions written in shorthand only she and her assistant understood. At the top of today's page, in her neat handwriting, sat 4 words: Final acquisition approval pending. The words seemed to pulse on the page. A soft breath escaped her. She was the CEO of Waverly Holdings, a massive private corporation built from her father's legacy, an empire valued at nearly $10 billion. But the world didn't see her as a CEO. It didn't see her as a billionaire because Lena never let it. She had inherited the company at 23 after her father's unexpected passing. Since then, she'd mastered the art of quiet power. She ran the empire under her maiden name, Waverly, using a separate professional identity that allowed her to live a normal life as Lena Harrison in the neighborhood and in Mark's social circles. To Mark, she was the woman who liked to keep things simple and preferred using her small savings to help him when his business hit rough spots. He knew she had some inheritance from her late father, but he believed it was modest, just enough to keep a comfortable, low-key life. He didn't know that most of what he called investors in his company were in reality shell entities tied back to her. As she flipped a page, a flashback struck her without warning. She remembered sitting at a long conference table 9 years ago. She was 23, wearing a fitted blazer too formal for her comfort. Around her sat lawyers, seasoned, older, all staring at her with cautious respect. One slid a thick set of documents toward her. "This makes you the full owner, Miss Waverly," he said. Her pen shook slightly as she signed, the weight of her father's trust pressing against her chest. She hadn't even told Mark the full details then. They were still dating. Back then, she wanted him to fall in love with her, not with the numbers attached to her name. The memory faded, leaving her staring at the planner again. Behind Lena, Mark shifted in bed, waking slowly. His voice came out groggy. "Morning," he mumbled, stretching. Then he noticed her planner in her hands. His brow pulled together ever so slightly. "Up early again, with that little locked book?" he asked, half joking but fully curious. Lena smiled the way someone smiles when they're used to keeping parts of themselves hidden. "Old habit, from before my dad passed. I still plan my days on paper first." "Before what?" The question lingered silently in the room. Mark blinked at her answer, but didn't push. He rarely pushed. In his mind, Lena was just a soft, simple woman who preferred quiet routines and modest living. He had no reason to assume there was more. She moved to the window, letting the soft light touch her face. Their life looked peaceful from the outside. The modest house they chose on purpose instead of the large estate she could have bought. The minimal decor, the calm tone she carried. But inside, Lena lived with two worlds, the gentle wife who kept a peaceful home, and the brilliant strategist who oversaw financial empires, guided corporate giants, and made decisions that influenced hundreds of thousands of people. She glanced back at Mark. He was already picking up his phone, scrolling through notifications, taking his time. He never asked what she was doing awake so early. He never wondered why she stared into the distance with a mind full of unspoken burdens. Not because he didn't care at all, but because he never imagined she had anything serious to hide. As Lena closed her planner, a faint vibration jolted the surface of the table. Her work phone lit up. One message. Just one. From a number saved under a professional alias that Mark didn't know. "The board awaits your final approval." Her breath stilled. The acquisition she'd been negotiating for months was ready. A move worth billions. A move that only she could authorize. She quickly turned the phone face down just as Mark stood up and stretched. His eyes drifted in her direction, unaware, uninterested in anything beyond his own morning. Lena slipped the planner into her drawer and locked it again. Her fingers lingered on the key, just long enough for a thought she couldn't shake. Mark was becoming more curious lately. Too curious for someone who thought she was just comfortable, not rich. As she walked toward the hallway, her reflection in the mirror caught her eye. Calm expression, steady breath, soft face. But behind that softness, something else glimmered, a strength she kept buried for his comfort. She wondered how long she could keep both worlds apart. In the hallway, she heard Mark's phone buzz again, this time with a custom tone he always used for private messages he never shared. His voice dropped low as he answered, a tension in it Lena hadn't heard in a long time. That shift in his tone would soon begin a change Lena never expected. The tension slammed into the morning like a door thrown open too hard. Mark stood in the hallway, holding his phone so tightly his knuckles turned pale. His voice was sharp, low, and rushed. "No, not right now. I said I'll call later," he whispered harshly. Lena froze at the end of the hallway, just out of his direct line of sight. She had heard only fragments, but the tone alone sliced through the quiet house. Mark rarely sounded urgent, almost never. His usual nature was relaxed, easygoing, confident in a casual way. But now, he spoke like someone juggling two worlds. "Look, I told you, today's not a good time," he added, voice clipped. When he noticed her watching, he flinched and quickly ended the call. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just work stuff," he said too quickly. "A client who doesn't understand time zones." Lena nodded lightly, refusing to pry. She had learned long ago that demanding answers only push people farther, and she'd also learned, at great cost in business, that when someone is hiding something, they reveal more by what they volunteer than what they answer. The intensity of the moment faded into a slow, awkward quiet between them, the kind that raises questions neither person wants to ask. Instead of pushing, she stepped back and let him pass, the hint of that earlier strange tension still clinging to the air like static. Later that afternoon, while Lena prepared a simple lunch, Mark leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling his phone. "Mom's been on my case," he said casually. "She wants us to stop by. It's been a while. And she wants to finalize the guest list for my birthday next week." He said it lightly. "Let's visit." But Lena sensed something underneath, a restlessness, a need to shift attention away from the morning's call. She wiped her hands and nodded. "All right, we can go after lunch." They drove through quiet streets, Mark tapping his fingers on the steering wheel the entire ride. It was a habit he had when he was anxious, back when his business had struggled and he'd been waiting on investor transfers that he didn't know were actually her money, routed through legal structures to protect her identity. The tapping was back now, sharp and impatient. Lena folded her hands in her lap, her thoughts drifting back to the message from the board. "The board awaits your final approval." That responsibility lived at the edge of her mind like a quiet flame, but she had mastered how to hide it. She always did. She knew she could confirm the acquisition from her office later that evening. For now, she remained the quiet wife on the passenger side. Mark's family lived in a neatly kept home across town. His mother, Ruth Harrison, early 60s, elegant but sharp-eyed, opened the door with a smile that didn't fully warm her face. "Lena, dear," Ruth said, leaning in for a hug. But her eyes immediately trailed down to Lena's simple blouse and plain skirt. Her lips tightened. "Oh, this is what you chose today." Lena held the smile she always used for Ruth. "Yes, just something comfortable." Ruth looked at Mark with a thin, pointed grin. "Couldn't she dress better?" she muttered, not nearly as quietly as she thought. Lena heard every syllable, and Mark, he heard too. There was a tiny pause where he could have said something, anything. Instead of speaking up, instead of correcting his mother or defending his wife, he glanced away and pretended not to have heard a thing. Something small bent inside Lena, but didn't break. She had spent years learning how to bend without shattering. They stepped into the living room. Ruth talked about Mark's childhood achievements, proudly displayed old photographs, and praised his hard work starting his company. She politely ignored Lena's contributions to every conversation. When Lena tried to help clear the table or serve drinks, Ruth waved her off in a way that felt more dismissive than kind. Mark sat back enjoying the comfort of being adored in his mother's house. Lena stayed quiet, steady, her hands resting in her lap, answering when spoken to, observing more than she revealed. Still, beneath that calm, a soft ache began forming, a feeling she'd learned to bury before it ever grew too large. Halfway through the visit, Mark's phone buzzed again. He stiffened and turned away slightly as he checked the screen. The name flashed bright and unmistakable. Eva L. His thumb moved fast. Tap, silence, lock screen. He faced the room again with an almost exaggerated casualness. His movements were far too practiced to be harmless. Lena's breath paused for a fraction of a second. She didn't react outwardly. Her face stayed soft, collected. But inside, tiny pieces of truth began clicking together. Later in the kitchen, while Ruth prepared tea, Lena reached quietly for a glass. On the counter, she spotted Mark's phone, where he had set it down carelessly. A simple notification preview glowed from the screen before fading. "I miss you. When can we talk?" The initials were gone, but Lena didn't need them. A memory surfaced, something her instincts had tried to warn her about months earlier. She remembered once walking into the living room unexpectedly and finding Mark adjusting his collar while a woman's voice whispered from his phone. He ended the call quickly, smiling nervously. Just a co-worker from sales, he'd said. She hadn't questioned him then. She wanted to believe him. Another flash hit her harder. Eva, a woman Lena had seen once at a restaurant after one of Mark's networking dinners. Eva had been well-dressed, confident, leaning close to Mark in the shadows outside the restroom. Mark had brushed it off. She was asking for directions, he'd said with a laugh that didn't quite ring true. But now the pieces were arranging themselves, forming a truth Lena wished she could ignore. Back in the present, Mark returned to the kitchen with effortless charm. "Ready to go?" he asked, leaning casually against the doorframe, as if the world held no secrets. Lena smiled softly, her expression unreadable. "Yes, let's go." As they stepped out the door, Ruth called behind them. "Remember, Mark, the birthday party is next week. Make sure she wears something appropriate. It's a big night." Lena's breath caught. The birthday party. The night everything would crack open. As they reached the car, Mark's phone buzzed again. He turned it over quickly, shielding the screen. His face changed. Just a flicker, but enough. Enough for Lena to feel the first shadow of a storm forming quietly at the edge of her life. The moment Lena opened the old wooden drawer, an unexpected wave of intensity rushed over her, like a sudden gust of wind in a silent room. Something inside the drawer pulled at her spirit before she even saw it. Her hands trembled slightly as she pushed aside neatly folded shirts and scarves until her fingers brushed against soft, aging fabric. The pale blue dress. It felt like touching an old memory that had been waiting quietly, buried but never forgotten. The world around her softened into silence. Her heartbeat, which had been unsettled since the day at Ruth's house, steadied. The intensity faded into a slow, warm ache as she lifted the dress into the light. It was simple, modest, and a little worn. A delicate lace trim lined the neckline, once bright but now faded with time. Threads loosened along the hem, and the side seam had begun to fray. Yet to Lena, it wasn't just fabric. It was the night she fell in love, or at least believed she had. A memory rose, gentle at first, then clear as glass. Years earlier, Lena had worn this very dress when she met Mark after his work shift. They stood under a soft porch light outside her father's old house. Mark was nervous that night, running his hands through his hair, rambling about how he wasn't good at expressing emotions. Then he suddenly held her hands in his and whispered, "Lena, I think I'm in love with you." She remembered the warmth in his eyes, the sincerity she believed without question. She remembered thinking that maybe love didn't need to be complicated when it felt that pure. That night, she hadn't told him she had just inherited a company. She wanted him to love the girl in the simple dress, not the heiress with lawyers and board members. The memory faded, leaving Lena standing alone with the dress pressed to her chest. With care, she sat at her small sewing desk. She threaded a needle with steady hands, the same way she had since childhood. Her wardrobe now could easily afford designer gowns, but she rarely bought them. She preferred pieces that carried stories rather than brand names. And for Mark's upcoming party, a part of her wanted to remind him of the man he had once been. The man who said, "I love you," to a woman in a simple blue dress. As she examined the small tear along the seam, another memory surfaced. One quieter, deeper, woven with love. She sat beside her father when she was a little girl, watching him repair the torn sleeve of her school uniform. He was a practical man, warm but disciplined. "Simplicity keeps you humble, Lena," he said, guiding her hand as she learned to stitch. "It reminds you to value what others overlook. Never let money change that." She had never forgotten that. Not even after inheriting the company he built with sweat and survival. Not even after becoming a leader at an age when most people were still learning who they were. That lesson was stitched into everything she did. Now as she repaired the dress she once wore on the night Mark confessed love, she felt the strange comfort of her father's presence, like he was still guiding her from a distance. Her needle moved through the fabric with practiced grace. She worked quietly, lost in a mix of memory, hope, and something heavier she wasn't ready to name yet. A small part of her wondered if wearing this dress to the party might remind Mark of who they used to be. Before the late-night calls, before the secretive messages, before the distance. Just then, Mark walked past the bedroom door. He saw the dress in her hands, paused for a second, and raised an eyebrow. Just slightly. Not with curiosity, not with warmth, with judgment. "What's that?" he asked, though he clearly recognized it. "You still have that old thing?" Lena smiled faintly. "It's the dress I wore the night you told me you loved me." For a heartbeat, something flickered in his expression, remembering. Then it vanished, replaced by a shrug. "Maybe you should treat yourself to something new for the party," he said. "You know how my family is." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I'm wearing this." He sighed but didn't argue. As he walked into the hallway, he pulled out his phone and typed quickly. A faint buzz vibrated through the quiet house. A message left his screen. "Can't wait to see you around the party. Keep it low-key," sent to Eva. He told her to be discreet, to show up later, to avoid drama. He didn't know Lena had glanced up just in time to see the name on his lock screen reflect in the mirror hanging across from her. Her breath faltered, but she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't question him. Her ability to remain calm had been built through years of corporate battles, quiet negotiations, and learning exactly when to hold her silence. Her hands continued stitching, but inside her chest something shifted. A tiny crack, a quiet fracture she tried to ignore. When she finished repairing the dress, she held it up in front of her. The pale blue fabric shimmered softly in the light, almost innocent looking. A piece of her heart lived inside every thread. She laid it gently across the bed. She didn't know yet that this simple dress, once worn during love, would become the target of public mockery. She didn't know it would be laughed at, picked apart in front of strangers. She didn't know it would be the moment that revealed everyone's true colors, but she felt something, a sense, a whisper in her chest, a warning, soft as breath. She traced the hem with her fingers. The dress that once symbolized devotion would soon become the symbol of betrayal. From the hallway, Mark's voice carried faintly as he answered another message. Warm, excited, meant for someone else. The party was getting closer. And the dress would not be the only thing torn. The noise hit Lena like a physical force the moment she stepped through the ballroom doors. Music pounding, cameras flashing, laughter thundering in waves. The intensity was overwhelming, a wall of sound that made her heart jerk in her chest. For a split second, she felt out of place, like someone pushed into a world that didn't belong to her. Then the chaos softened into a slow, uncomfortable awareness. This was Mark's birthday party, and every eye in the room was already on them. Lena stood beside Mark, who straightened his jacket and walked forward with a proud grin. He thrived in moments like these. Crowds, attention, admiration. Mark Harrison was the kind of man who enjoyed being noticed, praised, lifted up. 35, charming on the surface, and carefully built for social rooms like this. Tonight, he was in his element. Lena, wearing her pale blue dress, the one she'd lovingly repaired, stood quietly at his side. Her dress was soft, modest, and meaningful. Yet in a room filled with sparkling gowns, sequins, and luxury brands flashing like diamonds under the lights, she couldn't help noticing the contrast. Some guests gave her polite smiles. Others let their eyes travel down her dress, then quickly away, hiding judgment behind tight social grins. The whispers began immediately. Mark's mother, Ruth Harrison, elegant in her silver gown, leaned in close to her friends. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was precise enough to be heard by the people who mattered to her. "Lena doesn't know how to dress for real events," she murmured. A ripple of delicate laughter followed. Lena lowered her eyes for a moment, grounding herself, trying not to let her face reveal the sting. She reminded herself of what her father taught her. Simplicity was not shameful. But in this glamorous, shallow atmosphere, that lesson felt harder to hold on to. Mark didn't defend her. He didn't even glance in her direction. He adjusted his cufflink and let the comment float past, like it had nothing to do with him. He moved ahead, shaking hands, receiving compliments, hugging relatives. Whenever someone ignored Lena or gave her a half-hearted greeting, Mark pretended not to notice. It had always been like this with his family. Their warmth toward him, their cool politeness toward her. But tonight something felt sharper, colder, almost like they'd decided she no longer fit the image they wanted around him. Lena walked with him, staying close though the room felt too large, and the distance between them even larger. She tried to distract herself by focusing on the details, the chandeliers, the chatter, the polished floors that reflected moving shadows. The event planner Mark insisted on had done a flawless job. Money had been poured into the party, though she knew not all of it was truly his. Her mind flickered briefly to the silent accounts, the shell companies, the quiet ways she'd filled gaps in his business when clients were late or investors backed out. He'd thanked her in vague terms. "I don't know how things always work out," never realizing just how literally true that was. Her attention snapped back when the entrance doors opened again. A woman stepped inside, tall, confident, radiant. Her dress, a glittering red gown, hugged her body with deliberate elegance. Her dark hair was styled to perfection, and a slow smirk touched her lips the moment her eyes lifted toward the crowd. Eva Lane, Mark's mistress. The woman whose name had lit up his phone with intimate messages. The woman Lena had seen whispering to him once in a dim restaurant hallway. Lena's chest tightened. Eva moved through the room effortlessly, like she owned every step she took. Guests turned to glance at her beauty, unaware of the role she played in the cracks forming in Lena's marriage. Eva's gaze found Lena immediately, not by accident, not out of curiosity, but with intent. She smiled, not kindly, but with a subtle satisfaction, a smile that carried the message, "I know something you don't, and I enjoy it." Lena held still, her hands clasping slightly behind her back. She didn't speak, didn't move, didn't break. Years of restraint kept her steady. Across the room, Mark finally noticed Eva's entrance. His reaction was small but impossible to miss. A stiffening of his shoulders, a half step backward, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. He had asked her to keep it low-key, to arrive quietly later, to avoid attention. Seeing her glide in so boldly, so early, knocked the air out of him. He wasn't expecting this. Not like this. Eva's eyes slid from Lena to Mark. Mark swallowed, just once, but enough for Lena to catch it. How deep was this betrayal? How long had it been going on? How many moments had she missed because she trusted too easily? Lena breathed in slowly, pushing back tears before they formed. Her heart didn't break, not yet, but it began to crack in places she couldn't hide from herself anymore. Ruth, unaware or pretending to be unaware, gestured to a group of guests and whispered loudly enough for 2 tables to hear. "She tries, I suppose. But Lena simply isn't made for events like this." More laughter, more stares, more tiny wounds that piled one on top of another. Lena remained still, calm, silent, graceful in a room full of eyes ready to judge. She looked at Mark again. He was glancing at Eva, then at his phone, shifting anxiously, as if trying to silently communicate with Eva to be more discreet. He didn't once look at Lena with the concern she needed. Something was very wrong. She could feel it deep in her chest, a certainty forming the way dawn forms behind distant clouds. Something would happen tonight. Something she wasn't prepared for. She tightened her grip on her small clutch, steadying herself, because intuition whispered that this night would not end quietly. From across the room, Eva lifted her glass toward Mark in a subtle, private toast, one only he noticed. And Mark's shaken expression told Lena that the storm was only beginning. The moment the lights dimmed and the crowd gathered around the massive birthday cake, a sudden burst of intensity shot through the room. It wasn't from the candles or the cheering. It was from the sharp shift in Mark's energy. His posture stiffened. His smile widened too quickly. His eyes flicked nervously toward Eva, then toward the guests holding up their phones to record. The atmosphere felt charged, unstable, like a fragile glass seconds away from shattering. Lena sensed it before she understood it. Music lowered, guests circled, cameras lifted, some for Mark's memories, some for social media. A few younger cousins were already live streaming, laughing as they narrated the moment. Mark stepped forward confidently, ready for attention. As the noise softened into a slow swell of anticipation, Lena found herself a step behind him, clutching the pale blue dress she had repaired with her own hands. The dress that carried years of memories. The dress that wasn't meant to stand beside the glitter and luxury filling the room. Yet she wore it proudly, soft, simple, meaningful. She watched Mark greet people with the warmth she rarely received from him anymore. Champagne glasses clinked. Guests whispered about his success, his charm, his presence. Everything about him tonight was polished, confident, admired. Then Mark turned his head slightly, irritation crossing his features for a flash. The kind he used when he wanted someone else to fix something quietly. His collar. It sat uneven after he hugged a relative. Without thinking, Lena stepped forward, reaching gently to straighten it like she'd done countless times before. A quiet, loving habit, one she considered small but intimate, the kind of gesture no one else ever noticed. But the small step forward brought her dress dangerously close to the candle flames lining the front of the cake. She didn't see it. Mark didn't notice. A few guests saw the risk, but everything happened too fast for a warning. A sudden spark licked the hem of her pale blue dress. A tiny flicker, a soft crackle. Then a faint, smoky curl rose from the fabric as the lace trim burned. Gasps erupted. Lena jerked back, quickly patting down the flame before it grew, her heart racing. The burn mark was small but visible, dark, ugly, crawling across the delicate blue like a scar. One of Mark's cousins instinctively reached forward as if to help, but then hesitated when he saw everyone looking at Ruth and Mark, waiting to take their lead. Someone snickered. Another laughed. Then came Ruth's voice, sharp, loud, slicing through the room. "Maybe next year," Ruth declared with a smirk. "She'll dress like a wife, not a maid." Laughter exploded, shallow, cruel, echoing through microphones and over the phones still recording. Even guests who looked uncomfortable gave awkward chuckles, swept up in the crowd's reaction. Lena's breath caught. Her hands shook against the ruined fabric. Her cheeks warmed, not from the flame, but from humiliation that washed over her in a crushing wave. She looked at Mark, searching for defense, support, anything. But Mark laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not a kind smile, a real laugh, full, open, careless. He glanced at his friends, shaking his head as if to say, "What can you do?" As though she were an embarrassing joke, not his wife. That laugh hit her harder than the flame. Her vision blurred around the edges. Her lungs tightened. Close by, Eva Lane, beautiful, confident, Mark's secret mistress, leaned toward her friend and whispered with a smirk sharp enough to cut glass, "Even I wouldn't wear that." The friend covered her mouth, giggling behind her hand, phone still in the other, capturing everything. Lena's heart twisted. Something inside her, something soft and loyal, something she had protected for years, snapped in silence. She felt the crack, small but deep, a line splitting through her trust. She tried to hold herself steady, swallowing back emotion that burned hotter than the flame on her dress. Mark lifted his phone under the table, thinking no one saw him. He checked a message. Lena saw the quick flash of Eva's name reflected in the glossy surface of the cake display. His expression tightened in a way that told Lena, without a single word, who had just written to him. Her chest felt hollow. Guests moved on, laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating Mark's moment. The DJ raised the music again. People shouted, "Speech! Speech!" as if nothing important had just happened. Lena stood still, surrounded by glamour, yet completely alone. She pressed her hand gently over the burn mark, her fingertips trembling, feeling the place where her memories had been scorched. It wasn't just fabric that had been damaged. It was the symbol of a love she'd once believed would protect her. How quickly love could turn into something cold. How easily trust could crumble with one careless laugh. She looked up and caught Eva staring at her, not with sympathy, but with pleasure. Like she enjoyed seeing Lena so exposed. Mark didn't notice. He was too busy blowing out candles and soaking in admiration. The room counted down, shouted, cheered, raising cameras to catch the moment his wishes were made, while the woman who had quietly funded his dreams stood in the shadows of his ridicule. Lena's eyes softened, then hardened, a quiet shift so subtle only she knew it had happened. Her father once told her, "Dignity never shouts, it simply rises." Tonight she felt that rise beginning, slowly, painfully, silently. The camera at the nearest table cut to her face, the hurt hitting with the sharpness of a blade. A soft tremble in her lips, a shimmer in her eyes, a breath she fought to steady. Inside, something irreversible had begun. That was the moment something in her finally cracked. Across the room, unseen by most, Mark checked his phone again, Eva's name glowing on the screen, and the faint smile he tried to hide hinted that the real storm was still waiting to unfold. One of the guests kept recording, not knowing that this simple clip would soon circle the entire world. The intensity of the moment hit Lena the second the ballroom doors closed behind her. The noise, the laughter, the mocking voices, everything exploded into silence, leaving her alone in the cool night air with her heart beating too fast, too hard. She stepped down onto the stone path, gripping the burned fabric of her pale blue dress, feeling the rough, charred spot scrape against her palm. Each breath came sharp, as if she had been running. She wasn't crying, she wasn't trembling, she wasn't even angry, not in the loud way anger usually appears. She was numb, so numb that the world around her felt distant, like she was standing inside a glass box while life continued outside it. The intensity slowly melted into a heavy quiet as she stepped farther into the empty courtyard behind the venue. Soft lights glowed along the garden path, but none of their warmth reached her. The muffled sound of music slipped through the walls, a cruel reminder that the party went on without her. She stood under a small lamp, letting its weak glow fall on her ruined dress. Her fingers traced the burn mark again. A mark that didn't just damage fabric. It damaged memories tied to the dress, memories tied to Mark, memories tied to love she once believed in. Then the flashbacks began. She saw her father sitting at the edge of her childhood bed, repairing her school uniform. "Dignity over pride, Lena," he said gently. "You can lose many things, but never lose yourself." Those words echoed in her chest now, heavier, sharper, signing documents with a trembling hand while lawyers watched proudly. "Congratulations, Miss Waverly," one said. "The company is yours now." She remembered feeling overwhelmed, determined, and terrified all at once. She'd promised herself then she would choose people in her personal life who respected her, not just her position. Executives clapping as she finalized a successful deal. Handshakes, smiles, respect. A room full of people who saw her worth, while her own husband overlooked it daily. When she'd once asked Mark if he'd ever want to attend one of her work events, he'd laughed and said, "Your little admin meetings? You'd be bored if I showed up." Mark lifting her veil, smiling with soft eyes she used to believe in. "I'll always protect you," he whispered before kissing her forehead. The guests clapped. Her father blinked back tears. She had believed him, but tonight he laughed at her pain. Every memory collapsed into the next, crashing like waves until she felt the full weight of them pressing down on her chest. Lena looked at her hand, still holding the burned hem of her dress. Slowly she released it. She lifted her other hand and stared at the ring on her finger. The symbol of promises Mark had broken long before tonight. It wasn't only the public ridicule, it was every ignored insult, every secret message, every time he let his mother's disrespect pass without a word. The ring felt heavier than ever. Her breath steadied. Her heart slowed. The numbness sharpened into clarity. Lena pulled the ring off, not in anger, but with cold, steady resolve, and slipped it into her purse. The soft clink it made against her keys and phone was final, a quiet end of something already dying. She straightened her back, wiped her hands, and lifted her chin slightly. Something new had awakened inside her, something her father used to call courage wrapped in silence. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She took it out, her thumb hovering for only a moment before she opened a hidden contact, a number few knew existed. This wasn't the phone Mark ever saw her use for small freelance work or family matters. This was the phone tied to her real life, her real identity, the identity she kept buried for years to avoid people like Mark and Eva. Her fingers typed with calm precision. "Activate the contingency plan. I'm done hiding." She hit send without hesitation. For months at the first hint of Mark's secrecy, she had quietly asked Helen and David to prepare a contingency file in case she ever needed to protect herself quickly. Tonight she had crossed that invisible line. She tucked her phone away and exhaled a breath that felt like the start of a new life. In the quiet of the courtyard, a soft sound drifted from inside the building, the faint echo of Eva's laughter. Then Mark's voice, then more laughter. Lena closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't flinch. She felt nothing but a cold, steady strength rising through her chest. Behind her, through the ballroom window, Mark checked his phone again, his face twisting with a worry he tried to hide, unaware that the person he should fear was already walking away from who she used to be. The intensity hit the moment Lena shut the car door outside the tall, unmarked building. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the fierce energy of someone who had finally reached their breaking point and decided never to be broken again. She had driven herself, leaving the venue behind in the rearview mirror like a fading version of her old life. The burned edge of her dress brushed her legs as she stepped out, a physical reminder of the last insult she would tolerate. The night breeze rushed against her face as she stood before the building's tinted windows in strict security. To anyone else, it looked like a quiet corporate office. To Lena, it was the center of her real life, the one she kept hidden, protected, untouched by the chaos her marriage had become. She walked toward the entrance with sharp, purposeful steps. The guard at the door, Marcus, a tall man with a calm expression who had worked there since her father's time, straightened immediately when he saw her. "Good evening, Ms. Waverly," he said respectfully. The use of her real name, the one Mark had never bothered to ask more about, grounded her. "Evening," she replied softly but firmly. The intensity in her chest softened as she entered the building. The quiet interior held no laughter, no judgment, no shallow voices, only cool lighting, modern design, and the familiar scent of calm that came from years of building a world she trusted. Her assistant, Helen Morris, mid-40s, sharp, loyal, and one of the few people who knew Lena's full identity, rose from her desk the moment Lena walked in. Helen's eyes widened at the sight of the burned dress, but she didn't comment on it. "Lena," Helen said gently, her voice low, "you're earlier than we scheduled. Did it happen?" Lena's breath hitched, but she steadied herself. "It did," she said. "It's time." Helen didn't ask for details. She already knew more than most. Instead, she nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. She led Lena down a quiet hallway into a private conference room. Inside, Lena's lawyer, David Clark, late 50s, composed, intelligent, and a man who had protected her father's estate before hers, stood at the table sorting through a stack of folders and a thin laptop. He looked up as Lena entered, reading the weight in her eyes before she even spoke. "Lena," he greeted, his tone serious, "I received your message. We were ready for this." The words made something relax inside her. She had not been impulsive tonight. She had been pushed to the end of a road she'd been quietly mapping for months. Lena inhaled deeply, steadying herself as she approached the table. The documents spread across it were neat, organized, and devastating in their purpose. David pointed to the first folder, his voice steady. "Your premarital asset protection remains intact. Mark has no legal claim to your wealth. Your father's lawyers did their work well, and we've kept every update carefully separated from your married name. Not then, not now, not ever." Lena nodded slightly. She had handled her life with caution long before Mark ever entered it. David continued, sliding over another folder. "These are the business shares. As you know, Mark's company, Harrison Tech, only exists because of the silent funding you provided after his initial investors pulled out. Legally, every share belongs to you through Waverly Holdings. Mark is listed as managing director only. You can decide whether the business continues or ends." Lena swallowed. She remembered the day she agreed to fund his dream, signing the paperwork under her maiden name, Waverly, after her father insisted she protect everything she built. She was 21, sitting beside her father at his worn office desk. "Lena," he said, his voice tired but full of love, "never put your name on anything you don't control. People change when they see power. Protect yourself, even from the ones you love." His words wrapped around her heart now like armor. David opened a third folder and clicked his laptop screen toward her. Lena's breath caught. Inside the folder and on the screen were printed messages, photographs, and call logs, clear evidence of Mark's secret relationship with Eva Lane. Restaurant receipts, camera footage entering hotels on business trips, message backups from months of late-night texting. Helen spoke softly. "We collected this when you first told me something felt wrong. You said not to confront him yet. You asked us to hold it until you were ready." Lena blinked hard, her throat tightening. "I remember." Then David opened the final folder and tapped a video file on his laptop. Footage from the birthday party, the burn, the laughter, Mark's voice joining the mockery, Eva's smirk, Ruth's sharp insult. One of the guests who found the scene funny had already sent it to a group chat. Another, disgusted, had forwarded it to a mutual acquaintance who quietly passed it to Helen. People talk faster than they realized. The humiliation replayed in silence, but Lena felt each moment like a fresh bruise. She placed her hand on the table to steady herself, breathing deeply as she gathered all the strength she had built over years of quiet resilience. David handed her a pen. These are the documents to begin the account safeguards. Asset freezes in your favor and file for divorce. We can submit electronically tonight. By morning, he'll feel the effects. The room stilled. Her heart pounded. Her fingers closed around the pen with calm certainty. Lena signed the first page. David hesitated, watching her carefully. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this? He asked. Once we file, it moves quickly. There will be public attention, especially after the video leaks more widely. Lena lifted her eyes, steady, sharp, unbroken. I was ready the day I realized he enjoyed making me small, she said. Tonight just made it undeniable. Her voice held a quiet power that made both Helen and David straighten unconsciously, recognizing the rebirth of the woman behind the empire. As Lena closed the folder, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. The preview showed the first few words. You won't believe what Mark is planning next. Lena's jaw tightened. Whatever it was, he was already late. The game had changed. The intensity struck before the sun fully rose. Mark jolted awake to the sharp chime of notifications exploding on his phone. One after another, rapid and urgent. His head throbbed from last night's drinks and the emotional high of being celebrated. He reached for the device with a groan, expecting simple emails or forgotten reminders. But the moment his eyes focused on the screen, his entire body froze. Bank alert. Transaction declined. Bank alert. Joint account frozen. Notice. Funds inaccessible. Contact primary account holder. His breath hitched. Primary account holder? He'd always believed they were equal in finances, even if he let Lena handle the boring bills. He assumed his name was on everything important. Another message flashed. Online banking, access restricted. Contact account administrator, L.M. Waverly. L.M. Waverly? He frowned, still half asleep, not yet connecting the dots. Heart pounding faster, he threw the blanket aside and stumbled out of bed, nearly tripping over the rug as he rushed to the front door. At some point earlier, the doorbell must have rung. His foggy memory recalled hearing it and ignoring it, thinking it was a delivery that could wait. He pulled the door open, and there they were. A stack of envelopes. Thick, official, heavy. A courier stood halfway down the driveway, already turning away. Mr. Harrison, the courier called back. You've been served? The words hit like a blow. Mark picked up the stack with shaking hands and slammed the door shut. He tore the first one open. Notice of account action and freeze filed by Lena Marie Waverly. He blinked hard, reading the name again. Waverly. He opened the second envelope. Property ownership statement. Updated disclosure. Primary owner, Lena Marie Waverly, secondary resident, Mark Harrison. He blinked again, slower this time. The entire house, the one he bragged about to friends as proof of his success, didn't legally belong to him at all. His heart hammered. A faint ringing filled his ears as panic clawed up his throat. He tore into the third document. Petition for divorce and marital dissolution, filed by Lena Marie Waverly. Grounds emotional cruelty, betrayal, documented public humiliation. Attached were references to exhibits he hadn't seen yet. Messages, photos, statements. Mark staggered back, gripping the door frame to keep himself standing. No, this isn't real, he whispered. But the hardest blow waited in the last envelope, one marked with a seal he didn't recognize. He ripped it open. Business support termination notice. Harrison Tech owner, Waverly Holdings. Decision, dissolve all financial support and reclaim controlling interest. Effective immediately. Mark's mouth went dry. His company, his proudest creation, had been fully funded by someone else, someone with the last name Waverly? He scanned the fine print, shaking. Controlling shareholder, Waverly Holdings. Representative, CEO, L.M. Waverly. Managing Director, Mark Harrison. Operational, no equity ownership. His name was only there as an employee, not an owner. Before he could process it, his phone vibrated once more. A message from Eva. Eva, what's going on? Why is your card declined? My ride home last night almost got awkward. Eva, also people are tagging me in some video. Why is your wife's name all over the news? Eva, call me, now. Mark's stomach twisted into knots. Everything was collapsing at once. His money, his home, his status, his relationship with Eva. It all slipped out of his control like sand through his fingers. He ran through the house, shouting, Lena! Lena! His voice echoed through the quiet rooms that suddenly felt foreign. Then he saw her through the window. Outside near the car, Lena stood calmly, packing one small suitcase. No tears, no rush, no fear, just quiet precision, like someone completing the final step of a long, painful journey. Mark burst through the door. What is all this? He yelled, his voice cracking with panic. Lena didn't turn immediately. She folded a sweater neatly into the suitcase before finally facing him. The burn on her dress was visible in the early light, a bruise on pale blue. Her expression was calm, too calm. Just the truth catching up, she said softly. Mark's breath came in uneven gasps. Truth? Truth about what? You froze everything. You're tearing my life apart. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, her eyes holding the weight of years he had never cared to notice. I'm not tearing anything apart, she replied. I'm just removing what I built from someone who never valued it. Or me. He shook his head violently. No, Lena, we can talk about this. Whatever you think, whatever you heard, it's not what it looks like. We can fix this. Lena's eyes flickered with pain, but her voice didn't waver. I saw everything, Mark, and I stayed silent longer than I should have. Mark snatched one of the documents from her hand, desperate for explanation, desperate to understand. She let him take it. He unfolded the attached summary quickly, then froze. Lena M. Waverly, Chief Executive Officer, Waverly Holdings. Estimated net worth, $10 billion. Underneath, in smaller text, were cross-references showing that Waverly Holdings was the majority shareholder behind Harrison Tech. The paper slipped from his fingers. He stumbled backward as if struck. His knees buckled. You're the CEO? He whispered, barely able to speak. How is that possible? You're rich? You're that rich? Lena closed her suitcase with a soft click. I was always the same woman, she said gently. You just never cared to see me. Mark's mouth opened, but no words came out. His entire reality had flipped in minutes. And Mark, she added quietly, this house, the cars, your company, legally, they were always mine. I just never used that against you until you made mocking me a public spectacle. He collapsed onto the driveway, breathless, stunned, his world spinning uncontrollably. Lena lifted her suitcase and stepped aside so she didn't have to walk around him. She moved with the composure of someone who had finally accepted the truth and chosen herself. As Lena reached the car, her phone buzzed. David, her lawyer. His message read, everything is in motion. The media has the filings. He'll face the public consequences next. The intensity hit like a thunderclap the moment Mark's phone exploded with nonstop buzzing. Notifications rolling in so violently, the device almost slipped from his shaking hand. He grabbed it, breath unstable, eyes widening as message after message flashed across the screen. Bro, is this you in the viral video? Dude, your wife is the billionaire CEO? You were laughing at her dress? Dozens more followed, hundreds, then thousands. He clicked one link, and the world collapsed around him. The video from his birthday party now filled the screen. Someone had recorded everything. The burn on Lena's dress, the pointed laughter, Ruth's cruel remark, Eva's smirk, and worst of all, Mark laughing along with them. The clip was only 30 seconds long, filmed vertically and a little shaky, but it spread like fire through dry grass. The caption read, "He laughed at his wife's burned dress, then found out she owns his company." Millions of views, millions of comments. His hands trembled as he read, "She's the billionaire CEO? They laughed at her. She deserves better. Divorce him, queen." Imagine mocking the woman funding your entire life. His mom is just as bad. Some comments tagged business pages and financial reporters who quickly dug into public filings and pieced together what had happened overnight. Waverly Holdings filing for divorce, the account freezes, and the termination of support for Harrison Tech. Mark's breath caught. His heart thundered in panic. He jumped up from the couch, pacing the living room like a trapped animal. Every window felt too open now. Every wall felt too thin. His phone buzzed again. "Eva." He grabbed it, desperate. "Eva, why did no one tell me your wife is Waverly, the billionaire Waverly?" "Eva, they're dragging my name now. I'm being called the side piece who laughed." "Eva, I saw the video. You didn't even defend her." "Eva, I can't be involved in this. People are tagging my job." "Eva, lose my number. I'm done." Mark nearly dropped the phone. Eva, his secret escape, his comfort, gone with a few taps of a screen. Even she didn't want him anymore when real consequences appeared. Another call came in. His mother. He answered with shaky hands. Mom, you saw the video? I can explain." Ruth's voice cracked through the line, trembling with shame and fury. "Explain what? That you let them film me insulting your wife? Your aunt is furious. Your father hasn't left his room. People are sending us hate messages and threats. What have you done, Mark?" Lena never told us who she really was." Ruth cut him off. "It doesn't matter who she is. You laughed at her, on camera, like a bully. The whole world saw it." Her voice shook on the last words. "Don't come here until this dies down." Then the line went silent. Mark stood alone in his living room, surrounded by the deafening echo of his own mistakes. The intensity of panic slowly collapsed into something heavier: reflection, realization. He took a step back, bracing himself against the wall as memories flooded him. Lena's soft smile, her quiet devotion, her steady presence, the way she always tried to support him, the way she believed in him, long before he believed in himself. He remembered how she stood beside him even when his business struggled. How she moved some money around to help him stay afloat. How she cooked, cared, gave without asking for anything. And he remembered how he repaid her, with silence, with neglect, with laughter at her pain. A slow, crushing guilt spread through his chest. He sank onto the floor, but the world didn't give him time to break down quietly. His phone buzzed again, this time with a news alert. Breaking news. CEO Lena Waverly files for divorce after public humiliation. Husband mocked her dress, unaware she owned his entire company. A video thumbnail showed Lena walking out of a building, calm, dignified, beautiful in her silence, flanked by her lawyer as reporters shouted questions. Mark closed his eyes, feeling the sting of tears. He had lost her, not just the marriage, but the only person who ever loved him without condition, before knowing her net worth. He shot up suddenly. No, he couldn't lose her like this. He couldn't let the world take her away before he said something, anything. He grabbed his jacket and sprinted out the door. The courthouse parking lot came into view later that day. Reporters gathered near the steps, microphones and cameras swarming like bees. Voices roared. Flashbulbs popped. Then he saw her. Lena stood at the top of the courthouse stairs with her lawyer, papers in her hand, her expression steady and unreadable. She wore a simple, elegant suit, nothing flashy but perfectly fitted, the kind of outfit that made it impossible to ignore her presence. Mark rushed forward, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the questions, ignoring the way people recognized him from the viral video. "Lena!" he cried, his voice shaking. "Please, please, give me another chance." He reached out, desperate, broken, terrified. Lena didn't turn, not her head, not her body, not even her eyes. She walked forward slowly, each step filled with the kind of strength that comes only after surviving something soul deep. Mark froze behind her, crushed, helpless, watching the woman he destroyed walk away. The cameras captured everything: his collapse, her silence, the truth between them. As Lena reached the last step, her phone buzzed softly in her hand. A message from David. Tomorrow's hearing will finalize the interim orders. Be prepared. The intensity struck the moment the courthouse doors opened the next day. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing like white-hot lightning, microphones thrust out in a chaotic rush. The noise hit Lena in a violent wave. Shouts, questions, accusations, all crashing against her at once. But she did not flinch. She stepped forward slowly, her lawyer David at her side, shielding her from the worst of the crowd. The interim hearing had just ended. The judge had confirmed the account protections in her favor, recognized her sole ownership of key assets, and set the formal divorce proceedings in motion. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if she had spent the last few months preparing for this single walk. In truth, she had spent years preparing without knowing it. The chaos around her began to fade, melting into a thick silence only she could feel. Her heartbeat steadied, her eyes focused on the steps ahead of her. Not the reporters, not the cameras, not the world erupting around her. Every step she took felt like a reclaiming. She moved with the grace of a woman who had survived humiliation and walked out the other side stronger. Her phone buzzed quietly in her purse, but she didn't check it. She didn't need to. Everything she had set in motion was already unfolding exactly as it should. The public narrative no longer terrified her. Truth had taken on its own momentum. David slowed his pace beside her. "You handled the hearing well," he said softly. "The judge was clear. Your assets are secure. He can't touch your company." Lena gave a small nod. "Thank you." "You're free now, at least legally protected," he added. Free. The word settled into her chest like warm light. She paused at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Cameras zoomed in, capturing her steady breath, her straight posture, her calm eyes. For years, she had made herself small for love, for peace, for the idea of marriage she thought she could protect. But now, she wasn't small at all. A faint breeze lifted her hair as she turned away from the courthouse. Her heels tapped gently on the pavement, each step measured and confident. Behind her, the world still shouted her name, but inside she felt only quiet, calm, whole, certain. Across the street, partially hidden behind a cluster of reporters, Mark stood watching her. His clothes were wrinkled, his face looked tired, almost older than he was. His eyes followed Lena with a mixture of regret, disbelief, and longing. He didn't call her name, not this time. Even he understood that she was beyond his reach now. The court documents had made that clear. So had the look in her eyes when she passed him earlier in the hallway. Polite, distant, final. She didn't look in his direction, not out of cruelty, but because she had no reason to anymore. Some doors don't close loudly. They close with dignity. Her car pulled up, driven by Helen. The vehicle was simple but high-end, reliable, discreet, the kind she chose for practicality rather than status. Lena got in and shut the door gently, letting the noise of the world fade behind the tinted glass. As the car drove through the city, the reflection of buildings slid across Lena's face like shifting memories. Her mind drifted back, brief flashes of the girl she once was. Hopeful, giving, trusting. A girl who believed love alone could protect her. But life had shown her something else. That respect mattered just as much as affection. That silence could be betrayal. That strength didn't always look loud. Helen glanced at her through the mirror. "Ready for the next step?" she asked. Lena looked up, her expression steady. "Yes." The car pulled into the private corporate tower, her tower. The building rose high above the others. Clean lines, glass windows reflecting the sky. Waverly Holdings, her father's dream, her legacy. Inside, employees paused and straightened when they saw her. Not because she demanded it, because she had earned it. She walked through the marble lobby with quiet assurance, stepping into the private elevator reserved for her. The doors closed, soft music played. The ride was calm, still, almost sacred. When the elevator opened onto the top floor, Lena walked into her office. A spacious room with panoramic windows and a view that stretched far across the city. Everything felt familiar and new at the same time. She took her seat at the head of the long glass table. Her place, her world, her power. From outside the building, Mark stood on the sidewalk looking up, helpless, watching the woman he once underestimated rise to where she belonged. Lena rested her hands on the desk, shoulders relaxed. She didn't win because she was rich. She won because she chose dignity over those who never valued her. A calm smile formed on Lena's face. Some women wait for change. Others become it. Her phone buzzed with a new message. David, one last matter remains. Call me when you're ready. Maybe it was about final settlement terms. Maybe it was about what to do with Harrison Tech. Either way, the decision now belonged only to her. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.